We are quickly going through the whole para, so we are starting from 45.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I'll quickly read each sentence since I've already done it. How precisely or by what stages this progression and change will take place must depend on the form, need, and powers of the individual nature. So, there is the bonjour, Tarika.
Bonjour, Rangada. Sorry, I'm
Okay
late.
now. I heard you're not very well.
Yeah, I'm not too well, but okay.
All right. So, we are on page 145.
Yeah.
How
Okay.
precisely? Yeah.
Tarika, your video is on.
So each individual soul.
137. Mine.
145. We are starting.
130. Tarika, 136. 136.
Okay,
And your
thank
video is on. Your video is on. Please switch it off.
Yeah. Okay.
We are starting from 145. We are
Yeah.
quickly going through the whole para. How precisely or by what stages?
Yeah.
So each individual soul has a different rate, speed of development. Sometimes it's a very slow process. Most of the, all human beings have to go through hundreds of lives, sometimes even thousands of lives, okay? Until every life you get 1 inch of progress, and sometimes you may not even get that progress. You may even stagnate in one place, or it is possible also that you may drop back a little, okay? That also is possible. So it's a very slow progress because the goal to be achieved is infinite. And if it is infinite and your progress is only finite, step by step, naturally it will take a long time. There's nothing unusual about it. Okay? So this is what is being said. Just 1 second, I'll adjust the camera. Yeah. Okay. So how precisely and by what stages this progression and change of nature. Okay. But there are two things, inner nature and outer nature. When you do yoga, it is the inner nature that changes first. The outer nature is very difficult to change, and that is the reason why many are not interested in the change of the outer nature, your body, mind, life. Okay, all the imperfections of body, mind, life will continue for a long time. So Sriyamda wants even that to be removed, whereas the other traditional yogas are very satisfied only with liberation. Your soul, the inner being, becomes pure and it comes out into the higher levels of consciousness in the spiritual planes, and then after that it has a choice. It can remain there, it can disappear into the infinite from where it came, or if it is more inclined towards the integral yoga, it can take birth again in the world and help the others. Okay, so this is so it depends on the individual nature. That's what I'm saying in the first sentence. How precisely and by what stages this progression and change will take place must depend on the form, need, and powers of the individual nature. So form, even your form is important because your mind has a form. If it is well formed, then it's an advantage. But sometimes it may be deformed, it may not be very good. Then also your need, the soul need. How much do you really want liberation? How much do you want God? Need and powers or past lives. What are the powers that you have acquired? What are the capabilities that you have acquired? So these are the three things that determine the rate of progress. Okay? So individual nature. In the spiritual domain, remember the spiritual domain is level 2. This is very easy to understand. It's not. It's not very inaccurate. Okay. Level 1, your ignorance, our normal condition, and where there are also 3 layers: the physical layer, the vital layer, and the mental layer. This is level 1. You are in ignorance. Level 2 is a spiritual domain, where according to Sri Aurobindo, there are 4 planes. Okay. And according to Sri Aurobindo means he identifies these 4. Others may identify even more. Okay, that doesn't matter. It's a spiritual plane. Higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, overmind. This is spiritual domain. Level 2. Level 3 is the supermind, which is very rare. In the spiritual domain, the essence is always one. Now, this is very interesting. There is an essence and there are details of everything. The essence is always there for everybody, it's the same. Okay? And always one. Just also, you can also describe that essence and the details in this way. Take any tree, okay? This you can apply to anything, but a very gross example we can give. A mango tree produces 100, many more, 300, 400 fruits. The essence is always the same taste in all the mangoes, okay? Essentially. But each mango, the color will be different, the size will be different, and the taste also will be slightly different in each. Some will be more sweet, some will be sour. So this is the essence. The essence is the thing which is common to all. So in the spiritual domain, the essence is always one. One for what? For all the souls is the divine presence. But there is an infinite variety, and at any rate, in the integral yoga, the rigidity of a strict and precise mental rule is seldom applicable. It's very, very flexible. Spiritual truths are very flexible. But for our own understanding, because the mind is we have to sometimes draw lines and distinctions and differences. Okay? So, the rigidity of a strict and precise mental rule is seldom applicable. For even when we walk in the same direction, no two natures proceed on exactly the same lines, in the same series of steps, or with quite identical stages in their progress. Now, this is also very interesting because it implies that every soul that is produced at the beginning of the divine creates a soul. Every soul has got its own special function and own special character. No two souls are absolutely the same. Sometimes they are twin souls and sometimes they are related souls, but they are never absolutely the same. It is unique. Yes, tell me. Okay. I thought that someone was asking a question. Okay. So, even when they walk in the same direction, no two natures proceed on exactly the same lines in the same series of steps or with quite identical stages in their progress. Some may progress fast, some may progress slow. Even the rates will be the speed will be different. Would be very much in this order. Yet you can say that there are largely three stages. And what those three stages are, he is going to tell you one by one. First of all, there's a large turning in which all the natural mental activities proper to the individual nature are taken up and referred to a higher standpoint and dedicated by the soul in us, the psychic being, the priest of the sacrifice, to the divine service. So here you can see first movement, a large turning. Note the word large turning. It's not a precise turning. It's a large turning. Now your interest in the physical world has become less, and your interest in the spiritual, wanting to have the real knowledge of things, wanting to know about God and the world and your knowledge about everything, a large turning. There is basically a difference in the opinion. From the outward gaze on the physical world, the attention is mostly now turned inwards and upwards, inwards and upwards. So this is the large turning. It's not a very precise one, but large turning, in which all the natural mental activities, why is he speaking only of natural mental activities? Because he is referring to the Jnana Yoga. Okay? The Jnana Yoga in the integral yoga. Okay? So mental activities. It may exactly on the same lines, the same steps are with quite identical. It may yet be said so that there are three stages. The first stage, large turning, in which all the natural mental activities proper to the individual nature are taken up or referred to a higher standpoint and dedicated by the soul in us, the psychic being, the priest of the sacrifice, to the divine service. So note he is using the word soul in a very large sense. We have already discussed the soul is the unformed, general, amorphous, without form, the divine presence in everything. Okay? The word amorphous is very descriptive. It is not yet formed. Like the sea, you can say that the sea is an amorphous mass of water And the wave is the formed, the essence is formed into a psychic. Okay. So the soul is the sea, the divine presence, and the psychic being is individualized and formed, given a form. Okay. So there's a difference between the soul and the psychic being. The soul is just the general divine presence in everything, and it is amorphous, without form and without individuality. And in individuals, when it starts becoming more and more developed, more and more characteristics appear in the being, it becomes a psychic being. And what is the psychic being? Is the priest of the sacrifice. The first, I think we referred to it in the Rig Veda, the first shloka itself. Okay. Yet, Tarika, you remember the first shloka of the, it's not coming to my mind now. Okay. Ritvijam Hotaram. Okay. Ritvijam is a priest. Agnimide Purohitam Yajyasya Devam Ritvijam Hotaram Ratnadhatamam. Okay. It has come back to me now. So it's a priest. And who is the priest? He is the one who connects you with the higher. Your lower nature is connected with the higher through the psychic being. And the priest is doing exactly that. In every temple, there is a priest who takes your prayer and passes it on to the divine. Of course, he also takes a little bit of money. But anyway, that's his function. So the psychic being is the priest to the divine service. Second stage, okay, this is the first stage. Second stage, next there's an attempt at an ascent of the being and a bringing down of the light and power proper to some new height of consciousness gained by its upward effort into the whole action of the knowledge. So the first is the going inwards and getting the psychic touch. The second is the rising to the spiritual planes of consciousness. Sri Aurobindo is very clear that it is a safe method to do this. In the integral yoga, the three steps are like this. First of all, a large turning and a psychicization of the nature, then everything becomes safe. The building that you're going to build, the staircase to go up to the first floor, the higher mind and the illumined mind, then the staircase is well built. But if you don't have the psychic, it can be dangerous. The staircase can break, okay, and you may fall. So it's always safe to do the psychic first. Very developed souls, they can go straight up, ascend first and then get the psychic being. That's what happened to Sri Aurobindo. Okay, he went up first. Anyway, so that's the second stage. So now he's talking of the second stage. 1 second. Yeah. Next, that's the second. Okay. Sri Aurobindo doesn't say 1, 2, 3. He never says that. He says first, then next, and finally. He uses these words. So you have to supply 1, 2, 3. So next means second. There's an attempt at an ascent of the being and a bringing down of the light and power, okay, proper to some new height of consciousness. Every level of consciousness, there is a special light and a power appropriate to that level. Okay? Higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, lower mind. So, to some new height of consciousness gained by its upward effort into the whole action of the knowledge. All your knowledge becomes then appropriate to the level to which you have ascended. Okay? Here, there may be a strong concentration on the inward central change of the consciousness and an abandonment of a large part of the outward going mental life, or else its relegation to a small and subordinate place. Okay? In Sri Aurobindo, when he was in Baroda, he was 13 years he was in Baroda and he was doing intense intellectual work, learning languages. Okay, he even got a professor for Bengali because he wasn't very good at Bengali at that time. He didn't know. So there was a man who lived with him for a long time. I forget his name now, but he has written a book also and referred to many interesting characteristics of Sri Aurobindo. Okay, so he taught him Bengali. So how far? So the second is mental activity. But when he came to Pondicherry, okay, or going even to Bengal for the freedom movement, the intellectual activities took a second place. So, and finally in jail when he had the experience, the mental activities absolutely, when he came to Pondicherry, only concentration, studying a little bit of Veda and all that, but largely he's telling different things. See, he's saying different stages or parts of it may be taken up again from time to time. Wait a minute. Here there may be a strong concentration on the inward central change of consciousness and an abandonment of a large part of the outward going mental life. The details of your ordinary physical life are not important anymore. You turn away from that and go to the inward change. Okay? The inward change, remember, there is an outward change and an inward change. The outward change is the last. It's very difficult. Not easy to change your mental habits and your vital habits and your bodily habits also. Okay? There can be bodily habits also, physical habits. So those things are the last. So inner change occurs. The inner being, which is not necessarily always also pure, because that also has got its own imperfections. So the inner change comes first and then the outer change is the last. Very often it doesn't come very easily. Okay? So at different stages, it or parts of it may be taken up again from time to time to see how far the new inner psychic and spiritual consciousness can be brought into its movements. Note the words, the new inner psychic is horizontal inwards and the spiritual consciousness upwards, vertical upwards, can be brought into its movements. This is exactly, I told you last time also that he was testing, using Savitri for doing exactly that. Every time he gained a new level of consciousness, he wrote the first canto of Savitri. Okay? He did that 50 times. But that compulsion of the temperament or the nature, which in human beings necessitates one kind of activity or another and makes it seem almost an indispensable portion of the existence, will diminish. Your main interest, okay? Whatever, suppose some people are very interested in food, some people are very interested in ambition, some people are very interested in mastery over others, okay? Leadership. So all these things will become less, he's saying, will diminish. And eventually, no attachment will be left, no lower compulsion or driving force felt anywhere. Remember, Sri Aurobindo's whole idea was to liberate his country, and he was doing a huge amount of work for that. Even that took a secondary level when he came to Pondicherry. It did not die entirely. He was very much interested in the developments in India and the world, but it was less important than his inner life. Okay. He has told someone, my life has not been on the surface for men to see. Okay. So obviously it was an inner life. Okay. But that compulsion of the temperament of the nature. So every individual has got a compulsion of the temperament. As I said, each one will be interested in something. Somebody will be very interested in studies. Somebody will be very much interested in practical social work or whatever. There are so many different interests. So that will diminish, which in human beings necessitates one kind of activity or another. Somebody may be interested in social work. Somebody may be interested in achieving some other thing, teaching, for instance. There are many who are interested in teaching. Okay, it makes it seem like an indispensable portion of the existence. I can't do without this activity. That will diminish, and eventually no attachment will be left. No lower compulsion or driving force felt anywhere. Note the word lower compulsion, because the higher compulsion takes over. The higher compulsion, your aspiration, your idealism, all this is the higher compulsion. It's a compulsion. Compulsion is necessary because it is will, no? So that is what happens. Then only the divine will matter. The divine alone will be the one need of the whole being. If there is any compulsion to activity, it will not be that of implanted desire or the force of nature. So even in the lower compulsion, okay, it will not be determined by desire or by the force of nature. Very good example is Sri Aurobindo's desire for liberation of the country. It's outward, it's superficial. but it is not dictated by his desire or the force of nature. It's a divine command. Okay? But the luminous driving of some greater consciousness force, which is becoming more and more the sole motive power of the whole existence. On the other hand, it is possible at any period of the inner spiritual progress that one may experience an extension rather than a restriction of the activities. He has told you just now that most of the outer activities will cease or take a secondary place. The main activity will be the inner development. But now he is saying the opposite. Okay? He is saying that sometimes it can happen that your outer capacities, okay, open up. I gave you two examples last time and I will repeat now. When Sri Aurobindo was in jail, okay, suddenly his understanding, he has given this example himself, suddenly his capacity to understand all about graphic arts, okay, suddenly opened up. He says it is never there before. Line, composition, color, mass, these are all the things used for those who are artists, okay. What is the composition? How are the masses distributed? What are the colors used? What are the stresses? How to arrange your material? Okay, all this suddenly you could understand. Okay, restriction of the activities, there may be opening of new capacities of mental creation and new provinces of knowledge. I told you also about Raman Maharshi. At the age of 16, he went away, stopped his education. But later on, he was giving, he was looking at poetry in Telugu, Tamil, Malayalam, okay, and Tamil, Malayalam, Telugu, and Sanskrit also he was going on. So how? Then he was asked, how is it? You didn't do any of this. He says, when you go to the self, there is a large enlargement and many things open up. That's what Sri Aurobindo is saying. Okay? So, and these are all outward activities also. Appreciation of poetry is coming from inside, but it's finally outside. When you speak of meter, alliteration, okay, and the construction of the sentence, all these are all outward activities. So rather than a restriction, it can be an extension if you go to the self. There may be an opening of new capacities of mental creation and new provinces of knowledge by the miraculous touch of the Yoga Shakti. New capacities of mental creation and new provinces of knowledge. Very clearly, he is talking about himself because he always used to say, I am a poet. I have nothing of philosophy in me. But then when Paul Richard came with Mother in 1914 and they proposed that we start a magazine in French and in English, okay, and it was finally it was the Arya which appeared. Sri Aurobindo was forced to write philosophy and he thought to himself, okay, if the Yoga Shakti is there, I should be able to turn that energy to any activity. So he started with philosophy. He says in one place, I never was a philosopher. He stresses several times, never. But he was only poetry. So this is what he's saying now. Look at the language. New capacities of mental creation. Not poetic creation, but philosophical creation. And new provinces of knowledge. Philosophy and poetry are absolutely diametrically opposite by the miraculous touch of the Yoga Shakti. Yoga Shakti. Aesthetic feeling. The power of aesthetic feeling, the power of artistic creation in one field or many fields together, talent or genius of literary expression, a faculty of metaphysical thinking, any power of eye or ear or hand or mind power may awaken where none was apparent before. So what about power of eye? Graphic arts, okay, sculpture, painting, okay. So power of eye, power of ear, music, power of hand. You can say power of hand is
Painting.
Yeah, you can say painting, and you can also say sculpture, okay, or even the making of statues. So all that is the power of hand. and mind power, philosophy, and things like that may awaken where none was apparent before. But I want to point out one more interesting thing. He's saying, uh, talent or genius of literary expression. Okay, so one thing which many people are not aware of or don't think about it, but even in the field of literature, because Srinath was interested in literature, there is poetry and there is prose. But poetry also is of different types and prose also is of different types. So he wanted to experiment with all these. In poetry, for instance, you have the epic form. The epic is the most difficult because it goes through a huge number of pages, like the Ramayana and Mahabharata or the Iliad and the Odyssey. It's a huge thing and greatly, and usually it's written in iambic pentameter. It is not, there is no rhyming. Okay, that's an epic. But there's also sonnets. Then there are also lyrical poetry. Okay, so all these different. Then there are also these, in Japan there is a haiku. All this is literature activity. Okay, in poetry, different types of poems, lyric poems. Okay, with rhymes and sonnets. So he tried his hand at everything, all these. Even he tried his hand at what is called surrealistic poetry. Okay, surrealistic poetry is poetry which you will understand nothing or everything will seem to be most confused. Okay, if you want, next time I'll put up that poem of Srendul, and if you read that, you will laugh your head off. Okay, he had one surrealistic poem he created. Okay, when you read that, you will say, my God, what is this so funny? Okay, there is great humor in it. Achha, that is one. Then what about prose? You can write short stories, you can write novels, you can write huge treatises of philosophy, and you can have essays, you can have political commentaries. All this he tried. Short stories he did, several short stories, only because he has mentioned in the record of yoga that you must try your hand at everything, the one and the many. So even in the limited field of literature, the two main divisions are poetry and prose. And even in poetry, as I told you, there are so many branches, and even in prose, there are so many branches. So he tried all of them. Okay. That's an interesting part. Then what about aphorisms? Aphorisms also is another form of prose. Very short, pithy sentences which strike with great force. So all this he has tried, okay? Because he had to experiment in all the fields. Many fields. Creation in one field or many fields together. Okay. So I'm going into detail to see how Srindra is expressing his things, but we have to see what he means by behind that. The divine within, I'm reading now the next sentence. The divine within may throw these latent riches out of the depths in which they are hidden, or a force from above may pour down its energies to equip the instrumental nature for the activity or the creation of which it is meant to be a channel or a builder. Each soul has got a person, has got a personal work to be done in the physical world. So you become a channel for that. And this work can come from within. That means the psychic being, the divine presence contains all potential powers. Or it may come from above. Okay? It depends. So that's what he's saying. And you become a channel for that. So he is making a distinction between channel and builder. If you are a channel, you get the knowledge and you pass it on to others, but you can also be a builder. When the divine powers are channelized through you, you actually use those powers to build something. You can build a book, you can build a system, you can build anything. Okay? You can build a system, you can build a philosophy, or everything you can. But whatever may be the method or the course of the development chosen by the hidden master of the yoga, the common culmination of this stage is now he has come to the last. The common culmination of this stage is a growing consciousness of him alone as a mover, decider, shaper of all the movements of the mind and all the activities of knowledge. So Finally, you come to know that he is doing everything for you. Okay? So, stage 1, the opening to the psyche. Stage 2, the rising to the spiritual levels of consciousness. Stage 3, you become an instrument of all the divine powers and you express that you, in the individual world, you have become a channel of the divine. That completes the paragraph, a big paragraph. So now he says how to recognize at which stage you are. So we'll read that now. Page 147. There are 2 signs of the transformation. So we'll read. We'll read today. Yeah. Go ahead.
Shall I read?
Oh yes, why not?
There are 2 signs of the transformation of the seeker's mind of knowledge and work of knowledge, from the process of the ignorance to the process of a liberated consciousness, working partly, then wholly in the light of the spirit. There is first a central change of the consciousness and a growing direct experience, vision, feeling of the supreme and the cosmic existence, the divine in itself and the divine in all things. The mind will be taken up into a growing preoccupation with this first and foremost and will feel itself heightening, widening into a more and more illumined means of expression of the one fundamental knowledge. But also the central consciousness in its turn will take up more and more the outer mental activities of knowledge and turn them into a parcel of itself or an annexed province. It will infuse into them its more authentic movement and make a more and more spiritualized and illumined mind its instrument in these surface fields. Its new conquest, as well as in it, as well as in its own deeper spiritual empire. And this will be the second sign, the sign of a certain completion and perfection, that the divine himself has become the knower, and all the inner movements, including the activities of what was once a purely human mental action, have become his field of knowledge. There will be less and less individual choice, opinion, preference, less and less of intellectualization, mental weaving, cerebral galley slave labor. A light within will see all that has to be seen, know all that has to be known, develop, create, organize. It will be the inner knower who will do in the liberated and universalized mind of the individual the work of an all comprehending knowledge.
So, how to recognize the changes? He is telling you. Okay? There are 2 signs of the transformation of the seeker's mind of knowledge. Very clearly you can see that what you were before, you are not the same person. Okay? And what are the 2 signs? He is telling you one by one. There are the 2 signs of the transformation of the seeker's mind of knowledge. Mind you, he is still talking of the Jnana Yoga only. He will come to heart and other things afterwards. So the integral he will tell you afterwards. But right now, in the chapter on the ascent of sacrifice number 1, he is talking of the Jnana Yoga. There is a second chapter, ascent of sacrifice number 2. Okay, that's how he goes to other things. So now he is talking of the change in the mind, okay, knowledge, how to turn the activities of knowledge into a activity of sacrifice to the divine, whatever you are doing. Seeker's mind of knowledge and works of knowledge from the process of the ignorance to the process of a liberated consciousness, working partly, then wholly in the light of the spirit. Seeker's mind of knowledge and works of knowledge. The seeker's mind of knowledge, you are looking for knowledge. And what about the works of knowledge? The works of knowledge can be literary work, or it can be teaching, okay? Anything connected with knowledge, or a researcher. All these are the works of knowledge from the process of the ignorance to the process of a liberated consciousness. So remember, what is liberation? Don't be vague about it. Be very, very clear. Liberated consciousness is that which is not affected by body, vital and mind. That's a liberation. When it is affected by the body-mind life, then it is a prisoner of the body-mind life. So it is not liberated. It is imprisoned. But liberated consciousness is that which is standing outside the body-mind life. You feel it. Your center of thought is above the head. You feel it like that. Working partly, then wholly in the light of the spirit. It is the light of the spirit that is doing you, not your mental activity. And he's describing very beautifully what is mental activity and what is not mental activity. There is first, again he is saying first and then second sign also he will tell you, a central change of the consciousness and a growing direct experience, vision, feeling of the supreme and the cosmic existence, the divine in itself and the divine in all things. Okay, we'll stop here. First change. What is that? Central change. The central change is not in the body-mind life, but in the inner being and also a bit of the self also, vertical as well as inward. Okay, a central change of the consciousness. When Srinivas uses the word central being, he means the psychic and to a certain extent also the self. These are the central beings. Okay, both. Central being he uses in singular, but he means both. Okay, the self as well as the psychic being. And remember also that the psychic being is an ambassador of the self. Okay, it's a self is up in the vertical, and it sends its ambassador down into the. It's its representative. Okay, it's its ambassador down into the psychic. The psychic is a yeah.
The self is not, the self is above, no, the self is not below, no.
No, that's why it sends down its ambassador. Okay, the psychic is developing, whereas the self doesn't develop. It is already perfect. It is pure, infinite, eternal. But the psychic being, which is its deputy, which is its representative, is limited and it is also evolving. It is limited. Okay, and its limitation begins from absolute sleeping condition to slowly awakening. So the two are quite different, okay, and yet they are connected. Essentially, they are the same. Okay. Again, if you want to have images, the self is the sea, vast, without waves, absolutely infinite in every way, featureless, no movement in the sea at all. That's the self. And the psychic being is a wave. It is small, it is moving, and it is part of the sea. Okay, so that's a psychic being. But a wave is born and it dies. Okay, the psychic being does not die, but it moves. Okay, so that's the difference. These images can help, but you must be very careful because a wave can die, but the psychic being never dies. Okay, it is immortal. Okay, so we go to the next slide. There is first a central change of the consciousness, the growing direct experience, vision, feeling of the supreme and the cosmic existence. You have a direct experience. When you use the word direct, what does he mean? He means without the physical senses, not the physical eyes, not the physical ears, not the physical tongue and smell and touch, not these. But you subtle senses start operating. You start seeing, you start hearing, there is even taste and smell and touch, all these. In the spiritual world, smells are beautiful fragrances. All the fragrances that you can have, you can smell. Okay, so that's what he's saying. Direct experience. Direct means that without these gross senses. Vision, you start seeing, but not with the physical eyes. Feeling of the supreme, feeling and the cosmic angel, the divine in itself and the divine in all things. So, which is the divine in itself? The transcendent. The divine in itself without the cosmos and without the individual. That's a transcendent. And the divine in all things, the cosmic. Okay? He is there in all things. So the divine in itself, transcendent. The divine in all things, the cosmic, universal. The mind will be taken up into a growing preoccupation with this first and foremost, and will feel itself heightening, widening into a more and more illumined means of expression of the one fundamental knowledge. What is the fundamental knowledge? The knowledge of the divine. Okay? That's the fundamental. But it will take different forms. You may get interested in all sorts of other things. Okay? Fundamental knowledge is one, but it becomes illumined means of expression, and you can note the word heightening, widening. Okay? It's interesting. Heightening means focused. Okay? It gets one. But widening, it gets, it becomes wider, and the application is much wider. You can say in a certain sense that the heightening is the quality and the widening is a quantity. You can say that in a certain sense. Okay? Heightening is a sharpness and a widening is a wideness. Wideness is diluted, but you are aware of the divine presence everywhere. Into a more and more illumined means of expression of the one fundamental knowledge. But also, the central consciousness in its turn will take up more and more the outer mental activities of knowledge and turn them into a parcel of itself or an annexed province. Now that's another interesting image he is using, annexed province. Okay? So, a province can be annexed politically. One very good example, Sikkim was annexed by India. Okay, when Indira Gandhi was there, she annexed, it became part of India. So here he is using that image. Okay, so that activity which was not there available to you before has now been annexed and it becomes part of you. Like philosophy was not part of Suyamdo's mental makeup, but it got annexed into his mental nature. Okay, it became part of the nature. You can apply the same principle also to other things also. Okay. And note the word annexed province, because he is using the image again more and more. Okay, it will infuse into them its more authentic movement and make a more and more spiritualized and illumined mind its instrument in these surface fields, its new conquests, as well as in its own deeper spiritual empire. So, Swamiji is using an image, a political image of annexing provinces and making new conquests and empire. Okay, so you can see how he uses images. Okay, you have to be very careful to disengage the image from the. Here is a huge sentence, but the key words are exactly that. Okay, so annexation, province. Number one, first word annex. Number two, province. Number three, new conquest. Number four, empire. So he is using a very interesting image. This is how your activities in the spiritual field will go on becoming larger and larger and become part of you. Okay? And this will be the second sign. Okay, we have already. This will be the second sign. The sign of a certain completion and perfection, when the divine himself has become the knower, and all the inner instruments, including the activities of what was once a purely human mental action, have become his field of knowledge. You will feel that your identification with the divine is complete and he is doing everything in you. There will be less and less individual choice. You are not deciding anymore, no more choice. You are open and you are receiving only. Okay? There is no choice, there is no opinion. The word opinion is very clear. It refers to the mental knowledge. When you go to the spiritual planes of consciousness, you have no knowledge, you have no opinion. Why? Because you are seeing the reality. There is no need of opinion or preference. Less and less of intellectualization, mental weaving, cerebral galley slave labor. In the earlier days, when you had only not diesel engines and not steam engines and all, you had to row, you had to use wind power. So at that time you had to use galley slave labor. there will be slaves. 20 slaves on one side of the boat, 20 slaves on the other side of the boat, and all rowing. Great labor. So, cerebral galley slave labor. Okay? You have to exercise your mind and go on thinking, and coming to a conclusion. That's a process of science and normal mental activity. But spiritually, you don't have to work anymore. You just look and you know. The knowledge is put into your head from above. Okay? So, a light within will see all that has to be seen, know all that has to be known, develop, create, organize. You are not doing anything, it will develop. The light within will do everything for you. It will be the inner knower. The inner knower, your own individual knower who has now identified himself with the divine, who will do the liberated and universalized mind, who will do in the liberated and universalized mind of the individual the works of an all-comprehending knowledge. Your knowledge will include everything. There won't be any more narrow opinions. That's what he's saying. I have crossed the time by 3 minutes, so we will stop here today. So these are the two changes. So what are the two changes? First, there is a ascent, and you start realizing that you are becoming wider and wider. Secondly, you will feel that the divine is doing everything and you are doing nothing at all. The mind becomes absolutely silent and an instrument. These are the two signs. So, next we'll read these two changes next Tuesday. Okay, so au revoir everybody.
Au revoir,
Have a nice
Alveda.
day.
Bonne journée.
Okay. Yasmin, Shilpa, Pallavi, Tani.